All right. So we left off in Isaiah 64 with the prophet saying, hey, it'd be great if you could just tear open the heavens and come down. Well, let's pick up in Mark 4 as we continue the sacred story. In verse 35, the Bible reads, that day when evening came, he said to his disciples, let us go over to the other side. Leaving the crowd behind, they took him along just as he was in the boat. There were also other boats with him. A furious squall came up, and the waves broke over the boat so that it was nearly swamped. Jesus was in the stern, sleeping on a cushion. The disciples woke him and said to him, Teacher, don't you care if we drown? He got up, rebuked the wind, and said to the waves, Quiet, be still. Then the wind died down, and it was completely calm. He said to his disciples, Why are you so afraid? Do you still have no faith? They were terrified and asked each other, Who is this? Even the wind and the waves obey him. I love this episode in Jesus' life, and I love the response the disciples had, that they were terrified and asked each other, Who is this? Well, why were they terrified? When Psalm 65, verse 1, it says, Praise awaits you, our God, in Zion. To you our vows will be fulfilled, who stilled the roaring of the seas, the roaring of their waves, and the turmoil of the nation. What we see is that the disciples knew full well that that calming of the storm is the realm of Yahweh. And so when Jesus does it, they know exactly what they're witnessing. That's why they're terrified. They're terrified of Yahweh in human form, in their presence, in their midst, and they're freaking out, as I'm sure we all would. God is in our midst. And look at what Jesus says in John 14. Again, connecting this with the sacred story and God desiring to tabernacle with his people. In John 14, Jesus says, I will ask the Father, and he will give you another advocate to help you and be with you forever, the Spirit of truth. The world cannot accept him because it neither sees him nor knows him, but you know him, for he lives with you and will be in you. I will not leave you as orphans, I will come to you. Before long, the world will not see me anymore, but you will see me. Because I live, you also will live. So again, here we see the tabernacling presence of God. So Trinity, even if the word is not found in the Bible, the word Bible is not found in the Bible either, to be fair, is a biblical presentation of who God is, Yahweh. So again, Trinity, in my view, should be understood within the sacred story. Now, when you study out Trinity, whether in the Bible, definitely historically, that's not always been the case. We saw this in the Council of Nicaea in our last class on church history, and if you remember this, you really get bonus points. Homoousis and homoiousis is Jesus or same or similar, and all the kind of stuff. Which again, you find that Trinity has become denarrativized from the Bible story. But I think when you put it back in the story itself, I think it makes the most sense. So now here's my attempt at explaining Trinity. So you are welcome to poke holes in it. You can sniff out for heresy if there is any. I hope there isn't. But this is my attempt at explaining Trinity. Okay? It's not how the Bible explains it, just to be clear. It's just my explanation of why Trinity. Okay, you guys with me? So the question I'll ask is, does God get lonely? Imagine God all alone in the universe, all by himself, and there's no one around before creation. That's just him. And so if he's lonely, he needs company. So then he creates out of a need, a necessity, because he is completely alone. Like, it's just darkness. And maybe it's hard for us to even comprehend of the moment before creation, because all we know is creation. But if you're existing forever and there's no one, then I think you would you're like, hey, let's create something. Like even when Tino said other things worship God, creation worships and whatnot, but there's nothing. So he creates even creation out of this need because he is completely alone. And then if that is the case, then he is no longer I am. He is I am because you are, or I am because we are. But I am is self sufficient and fully self contained. It doesn't need anything from anyone. And I think Jacques mentioned it, and Celofello mentioned it. And that's really the Trinity. The triune God is self sufficient, self contained. They are perfect, perfectly united. They don't need us. And I don't know if I just crossed over heresy when I said they, because there's only one. Is one God. So please forgive me, Lord, for describing you incorrectly. But there's only one God, and He is self-contained. He does not need us at all. Now, if you read, if you think of Acts 17 or other parts of the Bible where that's exactly what is told. The other Elohim, they need us. They desperately need us. Yahweh does not need us. Yahweh is self-contained, self-sufficient. He wants us. Tino mentioned craving. Silofello, you mentioned God longs for us, but it's not lonely. And this again, hopefully it enhances our theology. And this is ministry. This is shepherding, personally, and even those we sit across. If someone feels like they're just not worth it, you can tell them that the fact God loves us without needing us itself tells us how worthy we are, how much value he gives us, because he does not need us. That's a different creation. If you are created for a need, for example, a computer is a tool, it's a utility device. We created a computer so it can help us live our lives better. Okay, whether it does or not is debatable, but that's why we created a computer. But God doesn't create us for utility. He creates us because he loves us, not because he needs us. He's not creating us to make his life better. He creates us because he loves us. Isn't that incredible? Like, I think that's an amazing theology that often is not preached or considered personally and maybe collectively. I can't speak collectively, but I know personally I don't often reflect on that. Now, I'm not saying this makes me I'm so special and I can't do anything wrong, and like I'm not trying to swing the pendulum this other way whereby humans are ascribed this incredible goodness, and like we're perfect and we're one step from being God and whatever craziness. Instead of swinging the pendulum to that extent, hopefully what this does do is helps us worship the triune God. This is not an inward, it's an outward worship. Like, God, thank you so much. You don't need us. And the fact you let us be in your family is a cause of worship, right? It's a cause of celebration, a joy, and gratitude. So that's my explanation of Trinity. God is family perfectly within himself. He does not need us to complete his family. you know, I think that's incredible. He's a God worthy of my worship. Now, if he's a God who needs me, then I'm not so sure about that. To be personally, I mean, you have your own view. That's fine. Personally, I'm not so sure. Like, I don't know. Like, so needy. Like, I want my God to be perfect. I don't want my God to be needy. But he's not. He's perfect. And he's family perfectly within himself. He invites me and us to be part of his family. That is amazing. In fact, he adopts us. That's amazing. Like, that's missiology. You can go preach that message. You can go and, I mean, we can live for that message for sure. We can go tell people, hey, do you know this? That God is perfectly family within himself and he wants to adopt you. It's like that's really amazing, uh, and invitational and encouraging, and all of it. So, anyways, that's my explanation of Trinity. But here's what my takeaway. So, God is three distinct but one. That's very important. Please do not think there's three gods. There isn't. There's only one God. Okay. And I don't know if you can see this. I'm sorry, my PowerPoint went through fast. But there's perfect free will unity. That's so important. Sam said it earlier, God of choice. Because when you read about Trinity, they always invariably ask the question, well, who is subordinate to whom? Is Jesus subordinate to God? Is this and that? And I'm like, no, I don't. That's not the right question. It's admiring perfect free will unity, and that's how unity is. That's how you can have genuine unity. And this goes into missiology, which hopefully Renee will speak on. I'm not sure. But part of the challenge of mission is hierarchy, where you create structures. And you may not be privy to that type of thing, but you could have structure in your discipling relationship. You could have structure within your ministry, the ministry leader, interns, so on and so forth. But free will unity actually requires a non hierarchy, it requires genuine collective willingness to be unified, not because there's someone over you that you have to be unified with, or because there's someone under you that you have to be unified with. And that's what we see in the triune God. It's perfect unity. Jesus willingly submits to his Father, free will. And that also, this is kind of cool because Sam said God of choice. we didn't talk before this class. There's perfect freedom of choice unity. Again, for unity to happen, you have to have freedom of choice. You have to be able to say no. Otherwise, you can't have genuine unity. And again, in mission, especially when you start thinking global mission, you can, the minute you introduce money, for example, it creates a hierarchy right off the bat. Whoever is giving and whoever is receiving, there's a power dynamic shift immediately. And the freedom of choice of unity is tainted. Are you unified because you get money from me, or are you genuinely unified? Now, can you say no to me? And if you say no to me, will I stop giving you money? So those are the real questions that missiologists have to address. And this has happened for thousands of years. I'm sure it'll happen because anytime you bring money or any kind of power dynamic, it could be respect. It without mindfulness, the person who is elevated and the person who is under this person, it has to be freedom of choice. It has to be, you have to be able to say no, and the relationship is intact. You still get whatever money you or whatever resources. It doesn't matter. That's hard to do, and that's why, you know, if you read missiologists, and they'll say anytime you have uh, funding, you're creating problems. As mission practitioners, that's my takeaway. That's my sort of encouragement for us to reflect and think and practice. We, not I, and we'll talk about this in the next session, we as a collective proclaim the triune God by word, deed, character of the mission practitioner. And I know you do this. We try doing this, right? Um, but that's the theology behind why we do. Why do we build relationships when we study the Bible with someone? Because the triune God is relational. That's why. Not just because it's a strategic reason, which it is. You know, you end up having more effectiveness in mission when you actually have relationship. But that's not the reason. The theology is the reason, because the God we proclaim is the triune God who is tabernacling with his creation, deeply, deeply relational. So let me stop here. Love to get some thoughts, comments. We'll take 3 minutes of reflection and then come back with what did you learn? How does your learning add to your faith? How does your faith lead to action?